First contact. The meeting chamber of the Galactic Council gleamed with polished metals and strange crystals. Captain William Grant of the Earth Defense Force stood tall, his blue uniform crisp despite the long journey. This was humanity's first official meeting with the representatives of 27 alien species. His palms were sweaty, but his face remained calm. "Welcome, humans," said High Counselor Zix, a tall being with golden scales and 4 arms. "We are pleased to welcome your species to the greater community of stars." Grant nodded respectfully. "On behalf of Earth, we thank you for this opportunity." Lieutenant Olivia Pearson stood 2 steps behind her captain. Her job as weapons specialist meant she was here to answer technical questions about Earth's defense capabilities. She watched the alien representatives with careful eyes, noting their reactions. "We have reviewed the information packet your government provided," said Ambassador Krell of the Vortex. His skin was blue and his eyes completely black. "Your technology is interesting." Grant noticed the slight pause. "We're eager to learn from more advanced civilizations." High Counselor Zix made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Indeed, your propulsion systems are primitive but functional. However, your weapons technology is quite amusing." Olivia stiffened beside Grant. He gave her a warning glance. "Amusing, Counselor?" Grant asked politely. Ambassador Tellara of the Zethari stepped forward. She was nearly human in appearance except for her silver skin and pointed ears. "You still use projectile weapons, bullets, missiles, physical objects propelled by explosions." She smiled in a way that showed too many teeth. "Most species abandon such crude methods once they discover energy weapons." "We have energy weapons as well," Olivia said, unable to stay silent. "But our conventional firearms remain effective." This prompted actual laughter from several council members. "Effective," said a squat alien with orange fur. "Against what?" "A pre-industrial species." Grant cleared his throat. "We find our mix of technologies serves us well." The tour of the council station continued after the meeting. As they walked through the massive structure, Ambassador Tellara pointed out their security forces, who carried sleek weapons that hummed with power. "Our phase disruptors can stun or eliminate threats without physical projectiles," she explained. "No recoil, no ammunition limitations, no collateral damage from missed shots." Olivia studied the weapons with professional interest. "What powers them?" "Quantum energy cells. They last for approximately 1 Earth year of continuous use." "Impressive," Olivia admitted. "But what happens if they fail?" Tellara looked confused. "They don't fail." Later, in the private quarters assigned to the human delegation, Grant met with his team. "They think we're primitive," said Communications Officer Ben Morris. "They do," Grant agreed, "particularly about our weapons." Olivia was examining the data pad they'd been given. According to this, most council species use energy shields for defense. They've optimized them against energy weapons, but not against bullets, asked Grant. "Apparently not. Why optimize against outdated technology nobody uses?" Olivia shrugged. "It would be like us designing tanks to be arrow-proof." Grant paced the room. "We need to be careful here. The Council is offering us technology and trade routes, but they clearly don't respect us." "Did you notice how the Vexilor representatives kept watching us?" Ven asked. "They seemed less amused and more calculating." Grant nodded. "Keep your eyes open. We're newcomers here, and not everyone welcomes new players." That night, as Earth's representatives slept, a message was sent from the Vexilor delegation to their homeworld. Humans maintain primitive kinetic weapons. Their military capability is negligible. Recommend immediate planning for expansion into their territory. The Council had laughed at human guns. They would learn their mistakes soon enough. Earth established its embassy on Celestia Prime 6 months after first contact. The massive space station served as the central hub for the Galactic Council, home to diplomatic missions from all 27 member species. Now humans had their own small section, marked with the blue and green flag of Earth. Ambassador Ethan Rodriguez adjusted his tie as he prepared for another day of meetings. His office overlooked the main promenade, offering a view of aliens of all shapes and sizes going about their business. "Another complaint from the Zethari," said his assistant, handing him a datapad. Rodriguez sighed. "What is it this time?" "They're upset about our security personnel carrying sidearms." This wasn't new. Since arriving on Celestia Prime, the human delegation had faced constant criticism about their outdated and primitive military technology. The mockery had become routine. Security Chief Samantha Foster entered the office, her uniform neat and her pistol holstered at her hip. "Morning, Ambassador. I hear the Zethari are complaining again." "They think the sight of firearms disturbs the peace," Rodriguez said. Foster crossed her arms. "Every other species has security. The Vordax guards carry plasma weapons that could melt through a wall." "Yes, but those are advanced weapons," Rodriguez replied with a tired smile. "Apparently, bullets offend their sensibilities." "I'm more concerned about the Vexlor," Foster said. "Their representatives have been following our people. 3 incidents this week." Rodriguez frowned. The Vexlor Imperium was the newest council member before Earth. They had a reputation for aggressive expansion and militarism. Even other council species seemed wary of them. "I'll bring it up in today's session," he promised. Later that day, Rodriguez stood before the council subcommittee on diplomatic protocols. The chamber was smaller than the main hall, but no less impressive, with its high ceiling and hovering translation orbs. "Honorable representatives," he began, "Earth requests formal permission for our security personnel to maintain standard equipment, including kinetic weapons, while on duty." Ambassador Tellara of the Zethari made a dismissive gesture. "Your weapons are unnecessary and provocative. Council security forces are more than adequate for everyone's protection." "With respect, every delegation maintains its own security," Rodriguez countered. High Councilor Zix tilted his scaled head. "Perhaps a compromise. Your guards may keep their pistols, but they must be ceremonial only. No ammunition." Rodriguez knew this was the best offer he would get. "Thank you, Councilor. We accept these terms." As he left the chamber, he noticed the Vexlor ambassador watching him. Unlike the other representatives who mocked human weapons, the Vexlor's expression was calculating. That night, Foster met Rodriguez in the secure communication room of the embassy. "I don't like this," she said, showing him her empty magazine. "My people are trained to protect you, and they're taking away our means to do so." "I know, but we need to play along for now," Rodriguez replied. "What's the status of our hidden reserves?" Foster lowered her voice. "Small cache of ammunition secured in the ventilation system behind your quarters. Emergency use only." "Good. Captain Grant sent a message today. The Vexlor have been building up forces near our colony on Mars." The council dismissed his concerns. Foster frowned. "They think we're no threat." "Exactly. And that might be our only advantage." Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm. Foster's communicator buzzed with an emergency signal. "Attack in progress. Lower embassy level," came the urgent voice of Corporal Rand. Foster was already moving. "Stay here, Ambassador." Rodriguez ignored her, following close behind. They rushed down the corridor to find one of their diplomatic aides slumped against the wall, bleeding from a wound in his shoulder. "What happened?" Foster demanded, kneeling beside him. "Didn't see them clearly," the aide gasped. "Some kind of energy weapon. They took the cultural data drives." Foster helped the man to his feet. "This is the 3rd attack on our personnel in 2 weeks." Rodriguez's face hardened, and the council still thinks we're being paranoid about security. Unknown to them, across the station, a Vexlor commander was examining the stolen human data, planning his species' next move against the defenseless newcomers with their laughable guns. Major Daniel Hayes stood on the observation deck of Earth's primary orbital defense platform, looking down at the blue planet below. 3 Vexlor warships had appeared at the edge of the solar system yesterday. They hadn't advanced yet, but their presence was a clear threat. "Status report," Hayes demanded, turning to the operations team. Lieutenant Garcia looked up from her console. "Vexilar ships maintaining position near Neptune's orbit. No movement in the last 6 hours." Hayes nodded. The situation was tense. In the 3 months since the attacks on the human embassy, relations with the Vexilar had deteriorated rapidly. Their ships had been spotted near several Earth colonies, always watching, always testing. "Any word from the Council?" Hayes asked. "Ambassador Rodriguez reports that they're still dismissing our concerns," Garcia replied. "They claim the Vexilar are conducting standard patrols, and we're overreacting." Hayes frowned. The Council's attitude hadn't changed. They still saw humans as primitive newcomers who posed no real threat to anyone. This blindness might cost Earth dearly. His communication device buzzed. "Hayes here. Major, it's Dr. Wright. I need to see you immediately." 20 minutes later, Hayes entered the research lab, where Dr. Allison Wright was waiting. Her desk was covered with data pads and holographic displays showing alien anatomical diagrams. "What's so urgent?" Hayes asked. Dr. Wright pushed her glasses up on her nose, excitement clear in her eyes. "I've been studying the Council species' defensive systems, specifically their shield technology." She pulled up a simulation showing a glowing barrier. Every major species in the Council uses energy shields based on similar principles. They're designed to disperse and absorb energy weapons, lasers, plasma, particle beams. "That's not news, Doctor," Hayes said impatiently. "No, but this is," Wright responded, tapping another control. The simulation changed to show a small object, clearly a bullet, hitting the shield. Instead of being stopped, it passed through with only slight resistance. "Their shields have a critical vulnerability to kinetic weapons," Wright explained. "They're calibrated to stop energy, not mass. A bullet passes through with minimal loss of velocity." Hayes stared at the simulation as it ran again. "Are you certain?" "Completely. I've cross-referenced this with the data from the Mars colony incident where Captain Grant's team repelled the Vexilar scouts. Their body armor has the same weakness, designed to disperse energy blasts, but vulnerable to physical penetration." For the first time in weeks, Hayes smiled. "So our primitive weapons might be our greatest advantage." "Exactly. No one in the Council uses projectile weapons anymore. They've optimized their defenses against what they consider modern threats." Hayes was already reaching for his communicator when an alert sounded throughout the station. Both of them rushed back to the command center. "Report," Hayes shouted as he entered. Lieutenant Garcia's face was grim. "Vexilar fleet is on the move. 3 more warships just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They're heading straight for Mars colony. Alert Earth Command. All defense platforms to combat readiness," Hayes ordered. A communication officer called out, "Incoming transmission from Celestia Prime." "Sir." Ambassador Rodriguez's face appeared on the main screen. He looked exhausted. "Major, the Vexilar ambassador just delivered an ultimatum to the Council. Earth must surrender its independence and accept Vexilar rule, or face destruction." "What did the Council say?" Hayes asked, though he suspected the answer. "They're discussing the matter. Some members believe we should simply accept the Vexilar terms to avoid conflict." Rodriguez's frustration was evident. "They still don't believe humans could possibly defend themselves against a superior species." "Request an emergency council session," Hayes said. "We need to make them understand what's happening." "I've tried." The request was denied. Hayes exchanged a look with Dr. Wright. "Then we'll have to show them ourselves. Prepare the fleet, and make sure every soldier has plenty of ammunition." The Council laughed at our guns. "Let's see if the Vexilar find them as amusing." The Vexilar attack on Mars colony began with a devastating barrage of energy weapons. Their 5 warships descended from orbit, purple beams cutting through the colony's outer defenses like they were made of paper. The colony's energy shields collapsed within minutes. Captain William Grant stood in the command center of Mars Defense Base Alpha, watching as their advanced defensive systems failed one after another. "Direct hit on Power Grid 6, shouted a technician. "Shield generators down." "Laser defense network offline," reported another. Grant's expression remained calm despite the chaos. "Deploy ground forces. All personnel to battle stations." Lieutenant Olivia Pearson approached, carrying a large case. "Captain, the prototype railguns are ready. Distribute them to the front-line teams," Grant ordered. "And break out the conventional weapons. Everyone gets a sidearm and rifle." Some of the younger officers exchanged confused looks. They had trained primarily on energy weapons, considering traditional firearms to be backup weapons at best. "Sir," one lieutenant objected, "shouldn't we focus on getting the plasma cannons back online?" "The Vexlor will be expecting that," Grant replied. "They won't be expecting bullets." Outside, the first Vexlor landing craft touched down near the colony's main dome. The aliens emerged in formation, tall humanoids in gleaming armor with insect-like features. Each carried an advanced energy rifle, and their bodies were surrounded by a faint blue glow. Personal shields. The human defenders had taken up positions behind barricades. Many held standard-issue plasma rifles, but others carried the heavier, more primitive-looking weapons Grant had ordered. "Remember your training," Pearson told her squad. "Aim for center mass. Controlled bursts." The Vexlor commander raised his weapon, his voice booming through an amplifier. "Humans, your defenses have fallen. Surrender now and your lives will be spared." Grant's voice came through their comms. "All units, open fire." The human defenders fired in unison. Energy weapons flashed out, striking the Vexlor shields, which flared brightly but held firm. The aliens seemed almost amused, stepping forward confidently as the energy dissipated harmlessly around them. Then the projectile weapons fired. The sound was deafening, a sharp crack unlike the whine of energy weapons. The Vexlor in the front line jerked backward as bullets tore through their shields and into their armor. Their advance faltered. "What is happening?" the Vexlor commander demanded, watching his troops fall. "Their weapons are ineffective." A second volley rang out. More Vexlor fell. Their return fire was intense, energy bolts sizzling through the air. But the humans had taken cover. When they emerged to fire again, it was with deadly accuracy. Pearson led a flanking maneuver, her team armed with conventional shotguns. They caught a group of Vexlor from the side. The aliens swung their weapons around, confident in their shields, only to collapse as buckshot tore through the energy barriers like they weren't even there. In orbit, Grant's second-in-command had taken control of the remaining defense platforms. Following new orders, they had switched from energy weapons to the station's emergency mass driver, essentially a giant railgun designed as a last resort against asteroids. The massive tungsten slugs slammed into one of the Vexlor ships, punching through its shields and tearing a hole in its hull. 3 hours after the attack began, the Vexlor were in retreat. 2 of their ships had been crippled, and their ground forces had suffered heavy casualties. The humans had losses too, but the colony stood. Grant stood among the defenders, watching the Vexlor ships climb back into orbit. "We did it," Pearson said, joining him. Her uniform was torn and dirty, but her eyes were bright. "They never expected our primitive weapons to work." Grant nodded. "Their shields are designed to stop energy, not mass." Dr. Wright was right. A communication officer approached. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Celestia Prime. The Council is demanding an explanation for what just happened." "Tell them," Grant said with a grim smile, "that humanity just defended itself with the weapons they laughed at." Across the solar system, the Vexlor commander reported to his superiors with disbelief. "Their projectile weapons passed through our shields like they weren't there. We were completely unprepared." The war had just begun. The Vexlor did not take their defeat at Mars Colony well. Within a week, a fleet of 20 warships entered the solar system, bypassing the outer planets and heading directly for Earth. This was no longer a border skirmish. It was a full-scale invasion. Ambassador Ethan Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Council, his patience finally at an end. Representatives from all 27 species watched with varying degrees of concern and curiosity. The Vexillor have launched an unprovoked attack on Earth, Rodriguez declared. We formally request Council intervention under the Mutual Defense Clause. High Counselor Zix looked uncomfortable. The situation is complex, Ambassador. The Vexillor claim they are responding to human aggression. That's a lie, Rodriguez said firmly. Their ships attacked our colony first. Ambassador Krell of the Vordax spoke up. Regardless of who fired first, our analysis suggests this conflict will be brief. The Vexillor military technology is significantly more advanced than Earth's. We recommend accepting their terms to minimize casualties. Rodriguez couldn't believe what he was hearing. You're abandoning us to invasion because you think we'll lose. It is simply realistic, replied Ambassador Tellera of the Zethari. Your energy weapons are rudimentary, and your reliance on projectile weapons is, well, charming but ineffective against modern defenses. Is that your final word? Rodriguez asked quietly. The Council voted. Only 3 species supported intervention. The rest abstained or opposed. As Rodriguez left the chamber, Security Chief Samantha Foster was waiting. Her expression told him she already knew the outcome. We're on our own, he confirmed. Foster nodded. Not entirely. I've been talking with security details from other embassies. Some are sympathetic. The Arcturians especially. They've had problems with the Vexillor before. What good will sympathy do against 20 warships? Foster's eyes gleamed. The Arcturians want to learn about our weapons, the ones that worked on Mars. Back on Earth, the atmosphere was tense but determined. Major Daniel Hayes had been promoted to general and placed in command of Earth's orbital defenses. The planet's major powers had united against the common threat, pooling resources and setting aside old rivalries. Status report, Hayes demanded, walking through the command center of Defense Platform Alpha. Vexillor fleet will reach lunar orbit in approximately 6 hours, reported Colonel Garcia. Our energy defense grid is ready, but based on Mars, we expect it to have limited effect. Hayes nodded. And our special preparations? Ready, sir. All platforms have been equipped with railguns and conventional missile systems. Nuclear warheads are armed and ready for your command. Dr. Allison Wright entered, carrying a tablet. General, the modifications to the ammunition are complete. These shells are designed specifically to penetrate Vexillor armor after passing through their shields. Good work, Doctor. Begin distribution immediately. On Celestia Prime, Foster had turned the human embassy into an impromptu alliance headquarters. Representatives from 5 different species were present, all from worlds that had experienced Vexillor aggression in the past. This is a standard projectile weapon, Foster explained, showing them a disassembled rifle. Simple, reliable, and completely effective against energy shields. The Arcturian diplomat, a tall being with pale blue skin, examined the weapon with fascination. And these can be manufactured easily. With the right equipment, yes. The technology is thousands of years old on Earth. The attack began exactly as predicted. Vexillor ships descended on Earth, their energy weapons disabling satellites and defense systems. Their commanders were confident, expecting an easy victory against the primitive humans. The first volley from Earth took them completely by surprise. Railguns mounted on defense platforms fired massive projectiles at incredible speeds. Nuclear-tipped missiles, technology the Vexillor had considered obsolete, detonated against their ships. Their shields, designed to disperse energy, did little against physical explosions. 3 Vexillor ships were destroyed in the first hour. 4 more were crippled. The rest pulled back to regroup, stunned by the effectiveness of what they had dismissed as primitive weapons. In the council chamber, live feeds showed the battle. The representatives watched in shock as the supposedly outmatched humans, not only held their ground but pushed back the Vexlor attack. "Impossible," whispered Ambassador Tillara. "Their weapons should be ineffective." High Counselor Zix turned to her, his expression grave. "Perhaps we have underestimated the humans, and perhaps the Vexlor have made a terrible mistake." The Vexlor fleet retreated to the orbit of Mars, regrouping after their unexpected losses. 7 of their 20 ships had been destroyed, and 5 more were damaged. Their commanders were in shock, unable to comprehend how the primitive humans had inflicted such damage. On Earth, celebrations were brief. General Hayes knew the Vexlor would return with new tactics. "We've surprised them once," he told his command staff. "They won't underestimate us again." Captain William Grant nodded in agreement. "We need to take the fight to them." "Exactly," Hayes said, "which is why I'm authorizing Operation Spearhead." The plan was bold. While Earth's defenses held the line, a small strike force would board the Vexlor command ship. Their mission was to capture or eliminate the invasion's leadership. 2 days later, Grant stood in the hangar bay of the assault ship Freedom, addressing 40 soldiers. Each carried a variety of weapons, standard firearms, shotguns, and even simple combat knives. "The Vexlor think they understand us now," Grant told his team. "They'll have adapted their shields to better resist our projectile weapons. But they're still thinking like energy weapon users. We need to think differently." Lieutenant Olivia Pearson stepped forward. "We've prepared special rounds based on Dr. Wright's research, fragmenting bullets that will separate after penetrating shields, armor-piercing incendiaries, and old-fashioned hollow points." "Remember," Grant continued, "once we're aboard their vessel, space is tight. Short, controlled bursts. Watch your corners. And if your gun jams, or you run out of ammo." He patted the knife at his belt. "We fight like our ancestors did." The Freedom approached the Vexlor fleet hidden among debris from earlier battles. Using minimal power to avoid detection, they drifted toward the massive command ship at the center of the formation. "Magnetic grapples ready," reported the pilot. "Attach us to their rear maintenance hatch," Grant ordered. "Exactly as we planned." The Freedom systems locked onto the larger vessel, pulling them silently toward a service entrance. Special Forces operators in spacesuits exited first, using cutting tools to create an entry point. Alarms blared as the humans breached the ship. Vexlor security forces rushed to respond, firing energy weapons that filled the corridors with blinding light. Grant led the first team forward, firing his rifle in controlled bursts. The Vexlor had indeed modified their shields. The bullets slowed more upon impact, but they still penetrated, especially the specialized rounds Pearson had developed. "They're trying to seal bulkheads ahead," shouted a soldier over the communications channel. "Bravo, team. Flank through the maintenance tunnels," Grant ordered. "Pearson, with me." They fought their way deeper into the ship, facing increasingly desperate resistance. The Vexlor were skilled warriors, but they had never trained for this type of combat. Their tactics were designed for energy weapon exchanges, taking cover, then emerging to fire precise shots. They weren't prepared for the humans' aggressive room-clearing techniques and the devastating effect of shotguns in close quarters. Back on Celestia Prime, the Council had called an emergency session. Ambassador Rodriguez watched in satisfaction as representatives from multiple species argued for immediate intervention. "The humans have shown remarkable capability," said the Arcturian diplomat. "The Council's failure to act shames us all." Security Chief Foster stood beside Rodriguez, monitoring communications from Earth. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "Operation Spearhead is underway." On the Vexlor command ship, Grant and his team had reached the central control room. The final push was brutal. The Vexlor commanders had surrounded themselves with elite guards wielding heavier weapons. "Flashbangs," Grant ordered. The human soldiers tossed the simple but effective stun grenades. The devices detonated with blinding light and deafening noise. Another primitive technology the Vexlor had no defense against. Grant led the charge through the smoke, his rifle barking. Pearson followed with her shotgun, clearing a path to the command platform where the Vexilor Supreme Commander stood. The alien was taller than the others, his carapace adorned with symbols of rank. He raised a ceremonial weapon, but Pearson's shotgun roared first. The commander collapsed. "Command deck secure," Grant reported, surveying the room as his soldiers secured prisoners. "The ship is ours." Throughout the Vexilor fleet, word spread quickly. Humans had captured their flagship and killed their commander. Their invasion force, already shaken by earlier defeats, began to break apart, some ships fleeing while others surrendered. 3 months after the defeat of the Vexilor invasion force, Earth's representatives arrived at Celestia Prime for a very different kind of meeting. The massive council chamber had been decorated with the flags of all member worlds, including, for the first time, the blue and green banner of Earth. Ambassador Ethan Rodriguez walked confidently down the central aisle, accompanied by Captain William Grant, Lieutenant Olivia Pearson, and General Daniel Hayes. The gallery was packed with representatives from across the galaxy, many standing to get a better view of the humans who had shocked the council. High Counselor Zix rose as they approached the central platform. "Representatives of Earth, we welcome you today not as observers or associates, but as full members of the Galactic Council." The chamber erupted in applause, some enthusiastic, some merely polite. The Zetheri delegation clapped with particular vigor, their earlier mockery of human technology forgotten. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, we accept this honor," Rodriguez replied, his voice carrying through the chamber. After the formal ceremony, representatives from a dozen worlds approached the humans with questions, offers, and proposals. "My government would be interested in discussing weapons training," said the Arcturian ambassador quietly to General Hayes. "Perhaps an exchange program." Hayes nodded. "We're establishing what we call the Kinetic Combat Academy. Your officers would be welcome." Across the room, Lieutenant Pearson found herself surrounded by technical advisors from various species. "Is it true that you modified standard ammunition to be more effective against our shield technology?" asked a Vordax engineer. "Yes," Pearson replied. "Dr. Wright discovered that by changing the composition and design of the projectile, we could maximize penetration even as shields were adjusted to resist." "Fascinating," murmured the engineer. "Such simple solutions." Captain Grant stood with Rodriguez as they accepted congratulations from various dignitaries. Ambassador Tellara of the Zetheri approached, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Captain Grant," she said, "I believe I owe you an apology. I was among those who mocked your primitive weapons when you first arrived." Grant smiled. "No apology needed, Ambassador. It was a reasonable assumption based on your experience." "Nevertheless," she insisted, "I was wrong. Many of us were wrong. Your victory has caused quite a shift in thinking throughout the Council." Security Chief Samantha Foster joined them, having just completed a meeting with the Council's Defense Committee. "It's official," she announced. "The Council has approved joint security forces. Human officers will train personnel from all member worlds in kinetic weapon tactics." "How the tables have turned," Rodriguez remarked. 3 months ago, they'd wanted our security guards to carry empty weapons. Later that evening, the human delegation gathered in their embassy, which had been expanded to reflect Earth's new status. The mood was celebratory but thoughtful. "To think," Hayes said, raising a glass, "all this because they laughed at our guns." "It wasn't just the weapons," Grant pointed out. "It was their assumption that newer always means better. They forgot the basics." Pearson nodded. "Sometimes the old ways work best. Every species out there abandoned projectile weapons as soon as they developed energy technology. No one stopped to consider that different approaches might have different advantages." "What happens now?" Foster asked, looking to Rodriguez. The ambassador smiled. "Now we teach and we learn. The Council has requested that we share our military technology with all peaceful member worlds. In return, we get access to their advanced science, medicine, faster than light travel, energy production." "And the Vexilor?" asked Grant. "Restricted to their home system for the next 50 years, Rodriguez replied. Their militaristic faction has been replaced by more moderate leaders. I think they learned their lesson. As night fell on Celestia Prime, news broadcasts throughout the galaxy reported on Earth's admission to the Council. Many included footage of human soldiers with their primitive firearms standing victorious aboard captured Vexlor vessels. In a small research facility on a distant world, a scientist watched these images with great interest. She turned to her colleague. Perhaps we should reconsider our own approach to defensive technology. These humans have shown us that there is wisdom in diversity of methods. Her colleague nodded. Indeed, the day the Council laughed at human guns became the day that changed galactic warfare forever. And across the stars, species that had once looked down on humanity now look to them for guidance, respect replacing ridicule, partnership replacing patronizing. The universe had become a very different place.